Hey, this is Steven with MCNC's Vital Cybersecurity Operations team, and today we're going to be looking into Falcon Spotlight. So as always, we recommend you log in, you follow along. We have a small test environment here that's really not going to reflect what your environment looks like. If you've got tens, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of devices, your environment's going to be wildly different. So please do follow along and try and replicate what I'm doing in your environment. So without further ado, let's get started. We'll click into our hamburger menu, click up here into Spotlight, and while we only have a few toggles here, this is an incredibly powerful component of the solution that we hope you take advantage of. Of course, MCNC doesn't proactively manage your Spotlight environment, however, we will reference it, so if we send you an alert about a detection, do expect to see a vulnerability report if we feel that it's pertinent. If you're going to put hands on something, you might as well close up all the vulnerabilities that exist. So this drops us into the Spotlight dashboard here. The anatomy of what we're looking at up top is that we've got critical, high, medium, low. These are CVE scores that CrowdStrike has applied their expert rating to. So if we look at a CVE score that's normally figured out in a vacuum, you're supposed to take that score, take those metrics, apply them to your environment. A vulnerability that needs network access is not going to be that severe if the device is properly sandboxed in the middle of the woods and you can only get to it by hiking through, a trail. Basically, that's what that means. A little bit absurd, but what I'm trying to say is a critical is bad, but a high that has a active exploit and bad actors are using it and they're chaining it in an attack to totally compromise your environment suddenly is a critical. Now here we have 28 criticals. CrowdStrike says no, you've got 48. That's not that good. Why would you do that, CrowdStrike? But they are nice when they say of your 639 highs, only 206 of them are really highs. And we're going to see that mediums are pushed down, and then, you probably got some mediums and highs here. But actually, CrowdStrike saying, you probably don't need to focus on those, they're lows. At the end of the day, these are going to be big numbers in your environment. Don't let them scare you. Look at your criticals, focus on them. Take care of your highs when you can. The mediums and lows will take care of themselves, and I'll show you how. This chart down here is pretty good to look at. This shows you the total posture of your environment. We all know Patch Tuesdays. When that occurs, you should start patching. You should see this ebb and flow accordingly. Once you've got all your devices rolled out, this is when this will have good value. If you ever see a spike in here, this is when we were doing more installs of machines. But when you see a spike, start to understand why. Did you just roll out a lot of new machines? Did you roll out some new software that has vulnerabilities? Perhaps you rolled out a version prior and there's a lot of vulnerabilities to it. Now you need to update or patch or something like that. Scrolling further down, we'll start to get a glimpse of some of the power of Spotlight, is that CrowdStrike has remediations. So CrowdStrike isn't going to just show you your vulnerabilities and help you classify and score them. They're going to summarize things into remediations. When you're short on time, I recommend our admins just look at remediations because that's where the power comes in. We look at recommended remediations, and we can see we have 3 hosts that Windows 10, all we need to do is apply the security KB. When we do this, we're going to close 642 vulnerabilities. If we click into this, this will all be interactive. We can start to see that, okay, I said if you take care of your criticals, mind your highs, everything else will come along. We can see that just by focusing on these criticals, that we'll take care of 17 criticals, 371 highs, 4 criticals, 74 highs. That's very powerful stuff. Again, if we click in here further, we get a lot of information about this. While Spotlight isn't a patch management solution, it doesn't have the ability to deploy everything. You can, in one-off scenarios, start pushing patches. So if this is something you can take advantage of, do so. Just don't plan on Spotlight being your full patch management solution. Of course, I said the mediums and lows will be important. We'll take care of 99 mediums. We'll take care of 1 low while we're at it. The vulnerabilities page we're in right now, it's pretty easy to access. If you come up here to Spotlight and you just click vulnerabilities, you'll come here. It'll show you your status of those that are not closed. So this is excluding anything that's closed, and this is excluding anything not suppressed. So when we're looking at this, there's a few things we can do. We can see this 2013 3900. This is almost like a bug regression. CrowdStrike calls it a critical. You have to go in here, take some action. There's not a simple Windows patch to take care of this. So say that you wanted to go through here and suppress it because you know you're not going to take care of it. That's something new CrowdStrike's added on. If you feel comfortable suppressing this, then you can set filters such as a CVE ID. You can give it a name. You can give it other information like that, and then you can choose accept risk. Compensating control, false positive. What does that mean? Accept risk is something you should generally never accept. You should never say, yeah, that's a vulnerability, I'm not going to do anything with it. That's like the front door is broken, the lock on the front door is broken, and you're just saying, you know, I'm fine. Anybody who wants to come in can come in. I'm just going to accept that it's going to happen. Not good. Compensating control means, yeah, the lock is broke, but it looks like it's locked, and I've got a really vicious guard dog, and, you know, I don't really have to worry about anybody coming through, because if they do, you know, I've got other compensating controls. The dog's going to take care of them, scare them off. Probably not going to have to worry about it. False positive would be for something that is, say, sometimes in Linux, they'll backport fixes. So they may say it's version 1, and version 1 has vulnerabilities. You need to upgrade to version 2. However, that Linux distro is backported those, so it says it's version 1. It says it's vulnerable, but it's really not. That would be false positive. Expiration dates are valuable because you should, even if you have a compensating control, even if it's a false positive, you've accepted risk, you should have a vulnerability management program where once a year, once a quarter, once every 6 months you review these. A handy way to do that is by just setting an expiration date out for 6 months, a year, whatever time. That way, if it hasn't naturally taken care of itself, you have to look at it again. Certainly true if you accept risk. If you're saying, yeah, fine, that door can just be unlocked, I'll get to it later on, then set this out for a quarter, and when you come back in a quarter, if you're still saying, yeah, I'm just going to let that door be unlocked, then set it there. The big thing is you don't want to use the suppression rule to hide something that could hurt you. MCNC has visibility here for notes for your future self or other resources that may have access to your portal. Descriptions are very important. It says optional. Highly recommend you put it in there. Sometimes I'll do something like, you know, S. Walton, the date that I put it in, and then accepting due to Wave 2 demo, and then just a expiration date of it, and you'll see, you know, sort of a history of what was said on here. Jumping back into that vulnerabilities page, we can look at a few different ways to manipulate what we have in here. So obviously right now we're seeing all vulnerabilities in our environment. That's not very helpful. Say we care about our Windows machines a little bit more, so we could look at our OS version and we could choose just the Windows 10 machines. Or we could choose, you know, just the Windows 11 machines. However, when we apply this, we're going to filter down our vulnerabilities to just what's on our Windows devices, and now we have 713 vulnerabilities. We could search by host name, we could search by server type, we could search by any of those metrics that we're familiar with from host management to try and pare this down and get a little bit more tactical and applicable. And of course, we're always able to export these as reports, either the vulnerabilities that we're looking at now or the remediations I'm about to talk to. That way you can hand that off to a tech who may not have access to the console, who may not need access to the console. When we look at any of these given vulnerabilities, though, we understand that CrowdStrike, being the threat intel company they are, is going to give us information about it. So we get the description of what this is, a little bit of understanding of it. We get pertinent links. We find out that the CVSS base score is a 8.1. Then we see how CrowdStrike has adjusted the score. It started off as a low, then it got bumped up to a medium. You get pertinent information here, and then you even understand why CrowdStrike is applying their expert rating. So this is more targeted by adversaries, the attack vector's the network, meaning you don't have to be hands-on. This is a new novel type of attack. You get the National Vulnerability Database, so there's not a lot of references there, so maybe this isn't a high because there's not a lot of references, and it's a very complex attack, and it's an unproven attack. So this is one where you see an 8.1 would be a high, But because the National Vulnerability Database doesn't have a lot of references to it, and it's very high complexity, and then it's an unproven exploit, well, it's not something you need to get out of bed for. You can treat it with a little bit less priority. You then see your vulnerable hosts. Threat details is important. If we were to find one of these, like this 2013 that's actively used, then all of a sudden you'll start to see hits on that. So threat details, actively used. Who says it's actively used? CISA says it's actively used. Microsoft says it's actively used. Reversing Labs has 31 samples. Sometimes if there's a GitHub repository of possible exploits, proof of concepts, those will be linked here as well, which are handy in case you want to test and verify yourself, or if you're trying to do some type of red team pen testing stuff, you can get links to there, learn and explore that way as well. Of course, we have more information here. We see the actual CVSS attributes that are important, and we see other references about the vulnerability. Now, looking at vulnerabilities is good. We've pared it down to our Windows devices. We're researching the ones that are interesting, that are making the news, that our leadership's asking about. But let's get a little bit more tactical. Let's start to look by product. So at this point, we're starting to summarize that. So we have 713 vulnerabilities, but there's only really 10 products we need to worry about. So what are those? We can look at this and make a huge impact. We can, really increase our security posture by knocking out a lot of low-hanging fruit just by looking at Windows. Our Windows 10 is vulnerable. Why is Windows 10 vulnerable? Are the users not patching? Are we not pushing patches effectively? Do we not have those mechanisms set up? Or, are these just machines that are, sort of reserved for other users? They're not powered on but once a month, so of course they're going to lag behind these vulnerabilities. And again, that's where you can start to use some of your suppressed vulnerabilities to come in here. And this would be one of the times where you could explore compensating control of saying, this is more filters. You can look for tag. If you have these tagged as backup devices, then that's something you would do. Of course, you want to be mindful with your filters, because if you put a filter of anything related to tag, then anything related to it wouldn't populate in here. But that's all stuff to think about as you're working through here, trying to get as true of information as you can. We then see that Google Chrome has 34 vulnerabilities, Thunderbird has 14, Firefox has 6. Somebody has Steam on their machine. Do we want them to have Steam on their machine? If not, they shouldn't have Steam. Just uninstall it. Why bother updating it if you can just uninstall it? However, if they're permitted to have it, they're part of an esports team, then again, you just make sure that that's updated. Same thing with all of these. Let's go a little bit more specific, though, because this is just saying, Windows is vulnerable. If you click product version, you get a little bit more information. So now we know that it's our Windows 10 21H2 machines that we need to care about. And we can click in there, and we can start to see more information. Here's where we can see the security KB. This is that 2013 3900 I used as an example of suppression earlier. And again, here's where it starts saying install patches or complete the remediation step as needed. Another way you can use this is right here. We have Netcore 6.0. Imagine if you have older versions of Office in your environment, so say Office 2013, getting close to end of support. It's a burden to maintain and everything. You can look at this and use this as justification for getting funding. If you go to your leadership and you say, hey, we need to expend this money because we're vulnerable. These are out of date. This is how many bad vulnerabilities there are. This is the picture that, you can paint by saying, hey, we have Netcore 6. We've got 2 vulnerabilities here. There's no remediations because we can't upgrade it any further. There's a bunch of available exploits. They're all critical. This is something we need to take action on. Really looking at this information and thinking about how you can use it to seed your story can be very powerful. We're going to look at remediations next because, again, this sort of summarizes. So everything we've been talking about thus far has been, okay, we need to think about this. We need to think about this. This is where we get down to, this is what we need to do. This is your task list that you could print out, and whoever's responsible for Windows 10, you can export this, hand it to them, say, this is what you need to do. You need to install this patch on these machines. You need to update Google Enterprise to version 107 or newer. You need to update Thunderbird to the latest version, update Firefox to 106 or newer. These are all the steps you need to take in order to close up these vulnerabilities, and of course they're sorted by number of vulnerabilities going down decreasing. You could change this and say, okay, I want to prioritize exploits. So after we get done with this one, we're going to come down here and we're going to fix this patch because there's 4 available exploits. Then we're going to fix Steam because there's 2 available exploits. And once we've gotten done with these and the one patch down here, then we'll start working on Chrome, on Thunderbird, on Firefox. Different ways to think of things, all valuable. Other sections in Spotlight that have been added on over time are installed patches. So of course some of these vulnerabilities are based off of Windows patch level. You can go in here and see that. So you can see if a device needs a reboot. Have patches been applied but it hasn't rebooted, that's why it's showing vulnerable? Or, you know, have the patches been applied, reboot pending, like this machine here. You can click into these and you can also see all patches that have been applied. So you can see patches, security updates, non-security updates, when Microsoft released it. You get a link to the catalog so you can access it a little bit easier. Of course, this looks like a CSV, so you can export it. You can toggle on columns on and off as you please, and overall get a quick view of this machine or pivot into host management if you want to figure out some more stuff about it. Finally, you have custom filters, reports, and suppression rules. These just link you into those pertinent sections that you may have seeded with information. If you've created a scheduled report, that's where you'll see it. If you've downloaded something, that's where you'll see it. And of course, we have custom filters if you wanted to start pulling out any vulnerabilities or installed patches to go above and beyond. That information's here. If you look through any of this, it's blowing you away, you're having a hard time wrapping your mind around it, feel free to reach out to MCNC, secops@mcnc.org. Just let us know, hey, I'm looking at Spotlight, I'm a little bit overwhelmed, can I have a call to walk through this? We'll be more than happy to jump into your environment, provide recommendations based off of what we see, again, in your environment, help you set up some of those reports, understand what it is that's important to you, and overall just try and help you extract that value out of this console. So, I'm Stephen with MCNC's Vital Cyber Security Operations team. Hope you've enjoyed the presentation. Again, if you have any questions, secops@mcnc.org. We're here 24/7, 365. Thank you. If you enjoyed the video, please do make sure to share it out with folks in your cohort or anybody you think it could be useful to. We're all in this migration journey together. And always remember, if you have any questions, we're here to help, and you know how to get a hold of us.